Welcome back to the Ariadne Project. This is Kira Marie and Tania Tuck.
Hi there.
Tania, thank you so much for joining us again. Tania is an emotional wellness coach. She is a certified Dean Martini method facilitator, and she owns Texomo Wellness Clinic. And we are doing a series where we are addressing specific stressors that are part of the common human experience, but oftentimes we aren't given the tools and the resources to know how to really cope with and move through these experiences in a healthy way. And so each week we are picking out one of these topics, and Tania is breaking it down, giving us a universal law that applies to this principle, and then showing us specific tools, specific action steps that we can take in order to really move through this stressor.
Yeah.
And this collaboration is especially important to me, that the overlap in our interests here is this idea of giving our audience actionable tools. That the reason why this is called the Ariadne Project is because everybody has demons that they need to fight in their lives, but Tania's approach is all about naming the demons, naming the minotaurs, and helping us break down these barriers so that we really can build a life of our own choosing. And this all feeds into my overarching purpose as an artist, that this is the substance from which I draw symbols from to create empowered visuals for my own clients. And to borrow a phrase from Tania, it's all about finding perfection in our story.
Yes.
So thank you so much for being here again with me tonight. This has been a really exciting and profound process to be going through this with you, Tania. So thank you.
No, I'm enjoying this.
It's like so good. So each session we are starting with a question from our previous episode, that we are giving people an opportunity to ask about the previous topic, this last one being about shame and guilt. And so we're going to begin by letting Tania answer the question that came in on this. That so many of us feel shame and guilt somewhere in our upbringing, that this was the method by which our behavior was controlled and modified in order to fit in with our families or at school or maybe even the religious community. And so the question is, what do we now do about it when we have had this history of shaming?
Okay, so it's true that as a child, we don't have much power. We're living in the lands of the adults that are looking after us. And they will be injecting into our worlds their rules, their ethics, their values, and we are living by those, and we don't really have much say. Because we're all individuals, and some of us our own values would resonate with the ones that the authority figures have. So we are happily kids who are good children. But for others of us who have value systems that are growing in us that are actually different to this can be really feel quite trapped, and that we as people feel that there must be another way. And sometimes this shows up when we are, acting out or being the rebellious teenager. I don't know if you've ever felt, were you a rebellious teenager?
It's interesting what you say, if someone's values kind of more naturally align with their parents. My oldest brother, his definitely did. And so he was more of the good kid, and me having more of an interest in being social and some of these other things, and was a little bit more challenging to my parents. But it was one of my younger brothers that really gave him a run for their money, because his values were less in in alignment, even more so. So I can see this spectrum. But you talk about injecting other people's values into our own world, and definitely in my own work, as I talk to people about what their struggles have been as I'm creating artwork for them. What is the history? What is the full spectrum of their story? That there's this idea of core beliefs. What are the stories that create our behaviors? A lot of the struggles that we come up against tend to be some variation of I'm not good enough, I don't fit in, or I'm not worthy or lovable.
Yes.
And so this is that disconnect between value systems, or what we as individuals prioritize. So this is often where we start deviating into depression, and that's our subject for tonight. Depression has really become epidemic in our culture these days.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I looked at Healthline, and they say that 16.2 million Americans will have a depressive episode at some point in each given year. So that's an awful lot of people. I find it frustrating that with my clients, that it seems that the first stop for a doctor when they're presented with people who would have signs of depression, they're put on antidepressants. And I've had clients who've been put on multiple antidepressants, which isn't working. And one of my clients was only 11 years old, and she was also put on an antidepressant. Yeah, I know. So it's an interesting thing. We obviously do have a sense of it's a very important topic for us to do tonight. And so what I'd like to do with depression is to start with the universal law that we can apply to this particular subject. Today I'm going to talk about the universal law of equilibrium, which is that all natural dynamics live in a balance. And so I want you to think about a seesaw, or a scale, or a balance, and if you have a visual. But the seesaw is the picture that I like, because you have the little sort of the central piece, and then the two sides, and they're when you're on the seesaw balance, they're equal. And so this brings in the law of polarity to the same degree, in the sense that when you have a bad or a negative thing, it's balanced out by the positive thing. And the law of equilibrium means they're in equal measure. So you don't have a little bit of a happy and a lot of sad. You'll have, in an event, there will be in equal measure, both things. So why is this important for depression? Well, if we imagine that our depression is one side of the seesaw, on the other side of the seesaw, what we've got is its opposite. And usually that means the fantasy. So we're depressed here because of something going on in our lives, right? Or should I say, something we don't think is going on. So on this side is the fantasy of how we think our life should be.
Should be.
Yes. And we hold a belief somehow that our life should be different, easier, happier, better. And because it's not, this is the side that we're feeling. We're feeling depressed to the same degree that we have the fantasy of how life should be. So I have a client, and she came to me about 5 or 6 years ago. And at the time, she was seeing a psychiatrist and a therapist. She was on 3 antidepressants. She really couldn't cope with her life. And so we went through all of her areas of her life. And what was going on was that she had the expectation that she should be supported rather than challenged. And what she was doing was finding she was challenged in relationships, at work, in her health. And So what we did was we did the exercise I'm going to just share with everybody in a minute. And at the end of that, she was feeling so much better. She got a new job. She was having really great new key relationships in her life. And she was reducing her medications and felt great. So it really is possible to do. And she was thrilled. You know, she got back control in her life. That was wonderful. So the thing that you can do is this. What I suggest you do is you look at where your depression started. It might have been a few weeks ago, it might have been years ago, but go back to that moment and think, what is it that I'm depressed about? And what was the fantasy about how life should be? Okay? And then what I want you to do is to say, okay, so this is how my life is, and what are the benefits to me, and bring it in a bit. And here, this is my fantasy, and what are my drawbacks of if this came true? If this was real, what would be the drawbacks? And you bring that in. And so what you're doing is you're actually making the fantasy reduce, and you're actually bringing up the actual life that you have been finding you've been challenged by, or you feel depressed by. Do you have, does that resonate with you, Kira?
It does. This idea of what we think our life should be, I think the unmet expectations is a huge source of pain and turmoil in a lot of people's lives. And so to give one particular example, I had put myself through dental hygiene school, and I had been hearing all the time, it's like, oh, what a respectable profession, and you'll be able to get health benefits, and all these reasons why this is such a good field. And I really saw this as the solution for my life, that I was trying to get my life to work for me, right? And my first dental job was so upsetting that they would, on paper, let me work within 2 hours of what would have me fully benefited. There were lots of ways that they were kind of taking advantage of the system, and there was a very established hierarchy, and me just trying to prove myself and be good enough or whatever for this environment, I was basically allowing myself to be treated like a peon. I was trying to be the yes person. It's like, see how useful I am. And so this fantasy that this is, what the dental field should be. And
so this side, the reality that you had versus
was not. Yeah.
So here you were feeling quite depressed about life.
Yeah. Yeah. And so to now look at this in a different way, like what is it, let's take down the fantasy. It's like, okay, this is not, what this field is necessarily going to be, but then also to start looking at what are the positive things from this, that each dental job that I've had has challenged me in its own way. It has made me absolutely learn to stand up and to have a voice, but then also to see the value in, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's like, oh, everything about the dental field sucks. That there is a space in it that is super important to me. My opportunity to have these very human connections with my patients. My license allows me to go on medical volunteer trips, which is a huge thing for me in my world. So yeah, take down the fantasy, but this is what I am getting out of it. There is a reason why I'm choosing
on this side with the sort of what it led to and how your life, you did actually find other avenues. You did do more creative stuff, I think, didn't you?
Yeah, that if I had gotten so comfortable and it's like, oh, well, this is just the dental field and I'll just stay here, I never would have been challenged to pursue really my higher purpose in my space as an artist, and creating these communities and bringing together people to collaborate to offer tools. Like, these are the void in my life, feeling like I lacked resources and tools, is what has caused me to create this whole thing. This what we're doing right here. I was going to just let the art and the things be a hobby, but this really caused me to focus on what is the space that I really want to exist in. What do I choose for my life?
So you can basically have this way of looking at depression as this thing with the other side in the law of equilibrium, that it must be balanced out equally by a sense of in quotes of fantasy about how life should be.
Mm-hmm.
If you can address it this way and do this where you bring this one up and this one down by looking at the benefits here and the drawbacks here, you basically find you have more, a sense of control will return. And
Mm-hmm.
I think you'll see that there's more choice and there's more optimism, and that your sense of gratitude can return. All that stress that you're feeling goes from distress to eustress. You remember that's what we were talking about, the kinds of stress you have. The one that actually is more proactive and where you can actually make a difference in your life. So the homework for anybody out there wanting to try this is in that moment, then do this little seesaw activity and see how, as you bring it, you change how you feel about these two situations. You will be shortening your seesaw, making yourself more stable. And if you're not doing these kind of things already, if you are feeling depressed, look at what activities you're doing. Get physical. Look at your diet. Make sure that you're reducing sugar intake, upping your water, looking after yourself in that front. And journal. I know it's simple, but journal how you're feeling.
No, that's so huge. Yeah.
And then the other thing would be try and sleep. I know that sometimes people who are depressed sleep an awful lot, but this, I mean, good sleep. I mean, get a good night's sleep.
Quality.
Yeah, get rid of your worries, get rid of your anxieties, and then just go to sleep and see how you feel in the morning. Anyway, there we are.
This is awesome. I definitely know for me, it's like a lot of these things that you talk about, this way of really sorting out our own minds and like writing, things out, that this is a huge part of it. That to really start seeing the bigger picture of the whole thing. Tania, thank you so much for introducing this subject. I know there are so many places that we want to go. This is such a huge conversation, and definitely if any of you listening want to ask specific questions, Tania is actually offering an opportunity for us to join her on a live webinar event. It will be a private group, so we can create safe space for each other to be vulnerable and honest, and really talk about what's going on for this.
I really think there's so much that we've just touched on here that I would
just the tip of the iceberg. Yeah. So I will be attaching in the comments below the link to how you can get information about our webinar that will be following our 6-part series. But next week, we will be going into our following topic on fear and anxiety. So if you have a question or an interest on this subject of depression, please feel free to ask. Again, I'll post links to myself or Tania. We will take that top question and we will answer it at the beginning of our next episode. And we're going to get right into addressing our fear and anxiety.
Yes.
Well, thank you for joining us tonight, Tania. This work that you're doing is beautiful, and I appreciate it so much. And thank you for sharing this with our audience. These are tools that we need in our toolbox, that I really believe that this is the substance from which we will be able to really start taking down the bricks of our labyrinths, those things that we consider barriers. Let's name our minotaurs for what they are and move into the very best version of our lives as we see these things for what they actually are.
Yes,
so
I agree.
Thank you for joining us tonight. This is the Ariadne Project, and we will see you next week. Take care.
Bye for now.